The year was 2287, and the stars seemed dimmer than they once had been. Through the reinforced viewports of the TAS Invictus, Captain Elaine Winters watched the endless black with eyes that had seen too much death. Her ship, a massive construct of humanity's best technology, drifted silently near the ruins of what had once been the Epsilon Eridani outpost. Now it was just another graveyard. "Status report," she said, her voice steady despite the weight pressing down on her shoulders. "Commander." Jack Morris looked up from his station, the blue light of the displays casting shadows across his tired face. "All systems operational, Captain. Repairs to the port shield generator are complete. We're as ready as we'll ever be." Elaine nodded. Ready wasn't what it used to mean. Not since the Voidborn came. The bridge of the Invictus hummed with quiet activity as the crew worked at their stations. They were the best of the best, the survivors, the last crew of the last warship humanity had left. 6 months ago, Earth had a fleet of 300 vessels. Now there was only the Invictus. "Message from New Terra coming in, Captain," said Communications Specialist Kate Thompson, her fingers dancing across her console. "Priority 1. Elaine's stomach tightened. Priority 1 was never good news. On screen, the main display flickered, revealing the face of Governor Paul Harris. His skin was pale, his eyes wide with barely controlled panic. "Captain Winters, they've found us. Long-range sensors picked up 3 world killers entering the outer system. We have less than 12 hours before they reach New Terra. You're our only hope." Elaine felt the eyes of her bridge crew on her. New Terra was the last major human colony, home to over 6 million people. If it fell, humanity would be reduced to scattered outposts and hidden settlements across the stars. "We're on our way, Governor. Start evacuations to the emergency shelters. The Invictus will be there in..." She glanced at Jack. 9 hours at maximum FTL, Captain," he supplied. 9 hours, Governor. Hold fast. Winters out." As the screen went dark, Elaine rose from her chair. "Set course for New Terra. Maximum speed. All hands to battle stations." The Invictus's engines roared to life, pushing the massive warship forward as it prepared to jump to faster-than-light travel. The stars outside the viewport stretched into lines as the ship tore a hole in space and vanished. In the engine room, Chief Engineer Sam Russell worked frantically to coax every bit of power from the ship's drives. His hands were calloused and burned from months of emergency repairs, but they moved with precision as he adjusted settings and bypassed safety protocols. "Give me everything she's got," he ordered his team. "Route power from the auxiliary systems if you have to." A young engineer looked up nervously. "Sir, if we push the engines any harder, we risk a core breach." Sam wiped sweat from his forehead, leaving a streak of grease. "If we don't get to New Terra in time, there won't be any humans left to care about a core breach. Do it." In the tactical center, Lieutenant Olivia Green studied the data from their previous encounters with the Voidborn. 7 battles, 7 times they should have died. 7 times they had somehow survived while other ships were torn apart. "There's something here," she muttered, eyes narrowed at the display. Some pattern we're missing. Beside her, weapons officer Ryan Cooper checked the ship's arsenal for the 100th time. "Does it matter how they're killing us if we can't stop them?" Olivia didn't look up. "It matters because we're still alive. The Invictus survived when nothing else did. I need to know why." In the science lab, Dr. Natalie Ford worked with similar intensity, analyzing readings from the Voidborn weapons. The data made no sense. Energy signatures that changed as she observed them. Radiation that behaved contrary to the laws of physics. "It's as if they're from somewhere else," she said to Dr. Alan Phillips, the ship's chief medical officer who had joined her research. "Not just another planet or galaxy, but somewhere with different rules." Dr. Phillips nodded grimly. "You should see what their energy does to human tissue." He brought up scans of Lieutenant Eric Mason, who had been exposed during their last battle. "His cellular structure is changing at the quantum level. It's like his atoms are trying to exist in 2 states at once." The ship hurtled through space, every minute bringing them closer to either humanity's last stand or its final defeat. In her quarters, Captain Winters reviewed the battle plans. though she knew they were little more than desperate guesses against an enemy that had destroyed entire worlds. A soft chime announced someone at her door. "Enter," she called. "Commander." Morris stepped in, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to Elaine without a word. "Thank you, Jack," she said, taking a sip of the bitter liquid. "Any updates?" "We've increased our speed. We'll arrive 30 minutes earlier than estimated." He hesitated. "It won't be enough to stop them from reaching New Terra first." Elaine set her cup down. "I know, but maybe we can stop them from finishing what they start." Jack's eyes met hers. They had served together for 15 years, had watched friends and colleagues die, had seen planets fall. Words weren't needed between them anymore. "The crew is ready," he said simply. "Whatever happens, the Invictus won't go down without a fight." "It's not just about fighting anymore," Elaine replied. "We need to understand them, find a weakness." She stood and walked to her viewport, looking out at the streaks of light that were stars rushing past at impossible speeds. "What do they want, Jack? Why destroy entire civilizations? There has to be a reason." "Does it matter? Would knowing why make them any less unstoppable?" Elaine turned to face him. "Yes. Everything has a purpose, a pattern. If we can understand what they're trying to accomplish, maybe we can find a way to stop them." Jack didn't argue. Instead, he joined her at the viewport. Together they watched the blur of stars, each lost in their own thoughts about what waited at the end of their journey. Throughout the ship, the crew of the Invictus prepared for battle. In the armory, Security Chief Peter Martinez inspected his team's equipment. In the medical bay, nurses readied supplies for the casualties they knew would come. In the hangar, pilots checked their fighters, though they had learned early that small craft were useless against the Voidborn. They were one ship against an enemy that had broken civilizations far more advanced than humanity, but they carried something the Voidborn hadn't encountered before: the desperate, stubborn refusal of humans to accept extinction. As the Invictus raced toward New Terra, Lieutenant Mason woke in the medical bay, his eyes now reflecting colors that didn't exist in human vision. His first words sent chills through the medical staff. "They're not destroying. They're transforming." The message was rushed to Captain Winters, who was already formulating a plan that no one had tried before: a blind hyperspace jump directly into the battle zone, placing the Invictus between the enemy and New Terra. It was a maneuver considered suicide under normal conditions. But these weren't normal conditions. This was humanity's last chance. 6 hours into their journey, the Invictus received another message from New Terra. The Voidborn had arrived early. The slaughter had begun. The Invictus dropped out of faster-than-light travel with a violent shudder. Emergency alarms blared as the massive ship's hull creaked under the strain of the sudden deceleration. On the bridge, Captain Winters gripped her command chair tightly, her knuckles white. "Status report," she called out as the ship stabilized. "We've arrived at the New Terra system, Captain," Commander Morris answered, his voice tight with tension. "Sensors show 3 Voidborn world killers already in orbit around the planet." The main screen showed the grim sight. New Terra, once a beautiful blue-green world, now partially covered by strange dark energy that seemed to eat away at its surface. Around it floated 3 massive Voidborn vessels, black, geometric shapes that seemed to bend the light around them in unnatural ways. "Any response from the colony?" Elaine asked, though she already feared the answer. Kate Thompson shook her head. "All channels are filled with distress calls and screaming, Captain. The defensive fleet has been destroyed. Ground defenses are failing." Elaine stood up, her decision already made. "Prepare for emergency hyperspace jump. We're going in close." Jack Morris turned to her with alarm. "Captain, a blind jump that close to a planet could tear us apart." "If we don't, 6 million people die," she replied simply. "Lieutenant Green, plot a course that will put us between the lead world killer and New Terra." Olivia's fingers flew across her console. "Course plotted, Captain, but I must officially register that this maneuver has never been successfully attempted." "Noted, Lieutenant. Prepare for jump on my mark." Dr. Natalie Ford's voice came urgently through the comm system. "Captain, I need you to delay the jump by 2 minutes. I've made a breakthrough regarding the Voidborn technology." 2 minutes we don't have, Doctor." 2 minutes that might save us all," Ford insisted. "I've analyzed Lieutenant Mason's cellular changes and the radiation patterns. The void-borne weapons operate on principles that violate our physical constants. They're not just advanced technology. They're changing the laws of physics themselves, in localized areas." The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. "What does that mean for us, Doctor?" Elaine finally asked. "It means conventional shields and weapons will always fail against them, but I've recalibrated our torpedoes to emit a counterphase radiation. In theory, it should disrupt their ability to manipulate physical laws." Elaine looked at the screen, where more of New Terra's surface was being consumed by the black energy with each passing second. "Load Dr. Ford's counterphase torpedoes. All hands brace for blind hyperspace jump. Mark." The Invictus vanished from its position and reappeared with a thunderous crash directly between the lead void-borne vessel and New Terra. The ship rocked violently, systems failing across multiple decks. "Damage report!" Jack shouted over the noise of buckling metal. "Hull breaches on decks 5 through 8, came the response. "Emergency bulkheads holding, shields at 62% and falling." Captain Winters wasted no time. "Target the lead world killer, fire counterphase torpedoes." Ryan Cooper at weapons control launched the experimental weapons. The bridge crew watched breathlessly as the torpedoes streaked toward the massive alien vessel. When they hit, something unprecedented happened. The void-borne ship actually showed damage. Its perfect geometric form disrupted where the torpedoes struck. "It worked," Olivia gasped. "They're vulnerable." But the victory was short-lived. The void-borne responded immediately, firing a beam of energy unlike anything they'd seen before. When it hit the Invictus, the entire ship seemed to increase in mass. Crew members collapsed to the floor, struggling to move as gravity itself intensified throughout the vessel. "They're using some kind of gravitational weapon," Jack struggled to say, his words slow and heavy. In engineering, Sam Russell fought against the crushing weight to reach the shield controls. Blood vessels burst in his eyes from the effort, but he managed to make the adjustments Dr. Ford had suggested. "Modifying shield harmonics," he gasped into his comm, attempting to create a counter-gravitational field. Slowly, the crushing pressure eased. The Invictus's shields glowed with an unusual purple light as they adapted to the attack. "Shields holding at 27%, reported an officer. "But they won't survive another hit like that." Captain Winters studied the tactical display. "The void-borne ships are repositioning. They seem confused by our resistance." In the science lab, Dr. Ford and Dr. Phillips worked frantically to understand what was happening. Lieutenant Mason lay on a table nearby, his condition worsening, as his body continued to change. "Look at these readings," Dr. Phillips said. "The void-borne energy is trying to rewrite the quantum structure of everything it touches. It's like they're trying to make our universe compatible with whatever they are." Mason suddenly sat up, his eyes glowing with an inner light. "They come from a place where physics works differently," he said, his voice oddly distorted. "Our existence is painful to them. They're not conquering, they're converting." Back on the bridge, the battle continued. The Invictus fired its conventional weapons along with the remaining counterphase torpedoes, causing visible damage to the void-borne ships. But for each hit they landed, the aliens responded with increasingly strange attacks. Beams that aged metal in seconds. Energy that made solid objects pass through each other. Forces that bent space itself around the human vessel. Chief Engineer Russell worked miracles to keep the shields functioning, rerouting power and manually adjusting systems that automated computers couldn't handle. His hands blistered and burned as he worked directly with overheating components. "We can't keep this up much longer, Captain," he reported. "The ship is taking damage faster than we can repair it." As if to emphasize his point, a massive blast tore through the Invictus's lower decks. Screams echoed through the comm system as crew members were injured or pulled into space through newly formed breaches. "Medical bay to bridge," came Dr. Phillips's urgent voice. "We're overwhelmed with casualties. And Captain, Lieutenant Mason is gone." "What do you mean gone?" Elaine demanded. "He just dissolved. His body broke down into some kind of energy pattern and disappeared. But before he did, he said something. The dimensional barrier is thinning. On the tactical display, more Voidborn ships appeared at the edge of the system, reinforcements arriving to finish what the first three had started. New Terra's surface was now covered in the black energy by nearly 30%. Its cities and forests transformed into something alien and incomprehensible. Captain Winters looked around at her bridge crew, tired, injured, but still fighting. She thought of the millions of people on the planet below, and of the scattered human outposts that would be next if New Terra fell. "We hold this line," she said firmly. "No matter what comes through that dimensional barrier, we hold this line." The Invictus, damaged and leaking atmosphere, adjusted its position to shield more of the planet. As the Voidborn's strange weapons continued to assault them, the human warship stood unbroken, a defiant barrier between humanity's last major colony and the forces that had already crushed galaxies. Hours passed as the battle raged around New Terra. The Invictus trembled and groaned like a wounded animal, but somehow its shields continued to hold. Inside the ship, crew members fought not just the enemy outside, but failing systems and structural damage within. 18 hours, Commander Morris said quietly to Captain Winters. "No human ship has ever lasted this long against the Voidborn." Elaine nodded wearily. Her uniform was torn and stained with blood from a head wound she had received when a console exploded. The bridge was operating on emergency power, lit only by the dim red glow of backup lights and the occasional spark from damaged equipment. "Any word from the evacuation shelters?" she asked. "Some of the underground bunkers are still holding," Kate Thompson replied from communications. Her voice was hoarse from breathing smoke for hours. "About 2 million colonists made it to the deep shelters before the surface was changed. Changed was the only word they had for what the Voidborn did. Nearly 60% of New Terra's surface had been transformed into something that no longer followed the laws of Earth physics. Buildings twisted into impossible shapes, water flowed upward. People caught in the transformation zones simply ceased to exist as humans would understand existence. "Captain," called Olivia Green from the tactical station, "I'm noticing something strange about the enemy attack pattern." Elaine made her way across the tilting deck to Olivia's station. "What is it, Lieutenant?" "They're not using their full power against us. Look at these energy readings compared to what they used on the planet's defense fleet." She pointed to fluctuating numbers on her display. "It's like they're experimenting on us." Before Elaine could respond, a new alarm sounded. "Hull breach. On deck 12, someone shouted. "Security team reports. Something is coming through." Security Chief Peter Martinez's voice crackled over the comm system. "Bridge, this is Martinez. You need to see this." His voice was shaking, something Elaine had never heard from the stoic officer. "Sending video feed now." The main screen flickered to show a corridor on deck 12. A tear had formed in the very fabric of reality. Not just a breach in the ship's hull, but what looked like a rip in space itself. Through it, Martinez and his team were recording something impossible. "What am I looking at, Chief?" Elaine asked, her mouth suddenly dry. "Another universe, Captain," Martinez replied. "Or at least that's what Dr. Ford is saying. She's here, with us." The camera shifted to show Dr. Natalie Ford, her lab coat torn and dirty, staring at the rift with a mixture of horror and fascination. "Captain, this is incredible. The Voidborn attacks have weakened the dimensional barriers around the Invictus. This isn't just a hole in our ship. It's a window into their reality." Through the rift, they could see swirling patterns of energy and matter that seemed to follow different rules. Colors that had no names in human language pulsed and flowed. Structures that couldn't exist in three-dimensional space somehow did. "We're recording everything with our suit sensors," Martinez reported. "But the breach is growing. Permission to seal this section?" "Granted," Elaine said. "But get that data to the science lab first." As Martinez's team retreated, sealing bulkheads behind them, another Voidborn attack rocked the ship. This one was different, more focused, more precise. It struck exactly where the dimensional rift had formed. "They're targeting the breach," Jack Morris realized. "They're trying to widen it." In the remains of the science lab, Dr. Ford and Dr. Phillips worked frantically to analyze the sensor data from Martinez's team. The equipment around them was damaged, but they had managed to salvage enough to work with. "Look at these readings," Dr. Phillips said, pointing to a display. "The Voidborn aren't destroying anything. They're converting our matter to be compatible with their physics." Dr. Ford nodded. "That's why Lieutenant Mason disappeared. His exposure to their energy had already started changing him at the quantum level. He didn't die. He became compatible with their universe and simply shifted over." "But why?" Dr. Phillips asked. "Why transform our universe instead of just staying in theirs?" "Perhaps their universe is dying," Ford suggested. "Or perhaps this is simply how they expand. The point is, they're not trying to kill us specifically. We're just in the way of their universal transformation." Back on the bridge, Captain Winters called an emergency meeting of her remaining senior officers. As they gathered around the damaged tactical table, she explained what they had learned. "So these aren't weapons of war as we understand them," Jack Morris said slowly. "They're tools of conversion." "Exactly," Elaine confirmed. "And the reason the Invictus has survived when other ships didn't is because of our experimental shield. Harmonics. They don't just block energy. They somehow maintain the integrity of our physical laws within the shield boundary." Sam Russell, his hands wrapped in bandages from his work in engineering, nodded thoughtfully. "That's why they keep probing us instead of just overwhelming us. We're the first thing they've encountered that resists their conversion process." Olivia Green's eyes widened with sudden understanding. "And that's why they're so interested in the dimensional rift. It's a weak point in whatever is making us resistant." As they spoke, the ship shuddered again. The lights flickered, and for a moment it seemed like gravity itself wavered. "Engineering reports shield generators are failing," an officer called out. "We can't take much more of this." Captain Winters looked around at her battered crew. They had been fighting for nearly 20 hours straight. The ship was falling apart around them, and yet they had discovered something crucial. Perhaps the first real hope humanity had against the Voidborn. "Sam," she said to the chief engineer, "can you modify our shields to project this resistance effect rather than just creating a bubble around us?" Russell thought for a moment. "Maybe. The main shield generators are too damaged, but we could reconfigure the backup system. It would be a pulse rather than a continuous field. One shot, so to speak." "How long would it take?" 3 hours minimum," he replied. "And I'll need Dr. Ford's help." Elaine nodded. "You have 2 hours, because in 3 hours, we'll have more company." She pointed to the tactical display which showed 5 more Voidborn world killers approaching New Terra. "Whatever we're going to do, it has to be before they arrive." As the officers dispersed to their tasks, Jack stayed behind with Elaine. "This is a suicide mission," he said quietly. "Even if this works, the ship won't survive." Elaine looked at her oldest friend. "The Invictus was always going to die here, Jack. The question is whether we take the Voidborn with us and save what's left of New Terra." Jack nodded, understanding in his eyes. "It's been an honor, Captain." "Likewise, Commander," she replied. "Now let's give these dimension-hopping bastards something to remember humanity by." Throughout the battered warship, the surviving crew worked with renewed purpose. They weren't just fighting to survive anymore. They were fighting to change the rules of a game that had been rigged against them from the start. And as the hours counted down, the Invictus prepared for one final desperate stand against forces that had crushed entire galaxies. The dimensional rift on Deck 12 continued to grow despite all attempts to contain it. Strange energies pulsed from the tear, affecting nearby systems and making crew members dizzy and disoriented if they got too close. Captain Winters ordered. The entire section sealed off, but sensors showed the rift's influence was still spreading throughout the ship. In what remained of engineering, Sam Russell worked feverishly alongside Dr. Natalie Ford to modify the backup shield generators. Their plan was ambitious and possibly impossible: to create a device that would project the Invictus's unique resistance to void-born physics into a wave that would force the enemy vessels to exist fully within our universe's physical laws. "Hand me that plasma coupler," Sam said, pointing to a tool on a nearby workbench. His bandaged hands shook from exhaustion and pain. "We need to reverse the polarity of the shield harmonics." Dr. Ford passed him the tool. "Even if this works, the feedback will probably destroy our shield generators completely." If it doesn't work, shield generators will be the least of our problems, Sam replied grimly. On the bridge, Captain Winters and Commander Morris worked with Lieutenant Green to develop tactics for their final stand. The Invictus had already surpassed all expectations by surviving this long, but the approaching Voidborn reinforcements would tip the scales decisively against them. We'll need to get close, very close, to the lead world killer, Olivia explained, pointing to the tactical display. Maximum effect of the shield pulse will only extend about 10,000 kilometers. That's suicide, Jack said bluntly. Their gravitational weapons will crush us before we get half that distance. Elaine studied the display. Not if we give them something else to focus on. Olivia, what about our remaining fighters? We have 5 operational fighters left, Captain. Not enough to make any real difference. They don't need to fight, Elaine said. They just need to distract, and we'll launch every drone we have with them. In the medical bay, Dr. Phillips struggled to treat the wounded with dwindling supplies and damaged equipment. Over a third of the crew was now either dead or too injured to function. Those who could still stand worked double shifts despite their injuries. "Doctor," called a nurse urgently. "You need to see this." Dr. Phillips hurried over to a patient, a young engineer who had been caught in the energy discharge near the rift. The man's body was changing just as Lieutenant Mason's had, but much more slowly. "I can see them," the engineer whispered, his eyes shifting to colors that shouldn't exist. "I can see what they're doing." "What?" Dr. Phillips leaned closer. "What are the Voidborn doing?" "Not destroying. Building. They're building something, a bridge between universes, a permanent one." The engineer's voice grew fainter. "They've done this before. So many times. So many universes." His body convulsed suddenly, then went still. Not dead, but not quite existing in the same way anymore. Dr. Phillips stared in horror as the man's form seemed to flicker between solid matter and something else entirely. "Bridge, this is medical," he called over the comm. "I have another crew member undergoing the same transformation as Mason. Before he changed, he said the Voidborn are building a permanent bridge between universes." On the bridge, Captain Winters received this news with growing alarm. A permanent bridge would mean total conversion, Commander Morris finished. "Not just New Terra, but everything." Elaine turned to Kate at communications. "Get me a direct channel to Dr. Ford in engineering. Now." When Ford's voice came through, it was nearly drowned out by the sound of failing equipment. "Captain, we're almost ready. Another 20 minutes and—" "We don't have 20 minutes, Elaine interrupted. "The Voidborn aren't just attacking randomly. They're building a permanent bridge between universes. If they succeed, everything gets converted to their physics," Ford finished, understanding immediately. "The dimensional rift on Deck 12 must be the anchor point. Can you use that? Target your shield pulse there?" There was a moment of silence as Ford considered. "Yes," she finally said. "Actually, that might amplify the effect. If we can reverse the rift, force our physics into their space instead of the other way around." "Do it," Elaine ordered. "How much time do you need?" 10 minutes to recalibrate. "But Captain, we'll need to be much closer to the rift for this to work. And the feedback, it will likely destroy the ship." "Just get it done, Doctor. Winters out." She turned to her bridge crew. "Prepare to move the Invictus to Deck 12. All non-essential personnel to emergency escape pods." Jack looked at her in shock. "You're evacuating the ship? Anyone who can't directly help with this final effort should have a chance to survive," Elaine said firmly. "That's an order, Commander." As escape pods began launching from the Invictus, the Voidborn ships responded with increased attacks. It seemed they understood what the humans were planning. Strange energies lashed against the ship's failing shields. Reality itself seemed to warp and twist around them. In the sealed section of Deck 12, the dimensional rift had grown to fill an entire corridor. Security Chief Martinez and a volunteer team had returned, setting up monitoring equipment at a safe distance. "The rift is becoming more stable," he reported to the bridge. "I can see structures forming inside it, like they're building a framework." "We're on our way," Captain Winters replied. "Stand by." The Invictus slowly maneuvered through space, positioning itself directly above the coordinates that corresponded to Deck 12. On the bridge, only essential personnel remained: Captain Winters, Commander Morris, Lieutenant Green, and a handful of others who had refused to evacuate. "Fighters and drones ready to launch," Olivia reported. "Engineering to bridge," came Sam Russell's voice, strained but determined. "Shield pulses ready. We've routed it directly to the rift. When it activates, it should force our universal constants into their space through the bridge they're building." "And if it doesn't work?" Jack asked quietly. "Then we've given 2 million colonists in those bunkers a few more hours to pray," Elaine replied. She straightened in her chair, her decision made. "Launch fighters and drones. Target pattern Omega." The remaining fighters streaked away from the Invictus, followed by dozens of automated drones. They flew in erratic patterns, drawing the attention of the void-born vessels. As predicted, the massive world killers turned some of their weapons toward this new threat. "Shield pulse charged at maximum," Sam reported. "Ready on your command?" Elaine took a deep breath, looking around at her bridge crew one last time. These people had already accomplished the impossible, standing against forces that had crushed entire galaxies. Whatever happened next, humanity would not go quietly. "Position us directly over the rift," she ordered. "All power to forward shields." The Invictus moved closer to the lead void-born world killer, now less than 15,000 kilometers away. At this distance, the alien vessel seemed to bend reality around it, its geometric shape somehow existing in more dimensions than should be possible. "Void-born reinforcements entering weapons range," Olivia warned. "1 minute until they can fire." "Captain." Winters nodded, her face calm despite everything. "All hands brace for impact." She pressed the comm button one final time. "Engineering, activate the shield pulse, now." In engineering, Sam Russell placed his burned hand on the activation switch. Beside him, Dr. Ford closed her eyes. "For Earth," Sam whispered, and pressed the switch. The moment Sam Russell activated the shield pulse, everything changed. A wave of blue-white energy erupted from the Invictus, centered on Deck 12 where the dimensional rift had formed. The energy expanded outward in all directions, not as an explosion but as a ripple in reality itself. It moved through space like a tide washing over sand, leaving everything it touched somehow more solid, more defined. When the energy wave hit the nearest void-born world killer, the effect was immediate and astonishing. The perfect geometric shape of the alien vessel suddenly buckled as if under enormous pressure. Its strange angles collapsed into more conventional forms. The darkness that had seemed to bend light around it faded, revealing a structure that now followed the normal laws of physics. On the bridge of the Invictus, the crew watched in stunned silence. "It's working," Olivia whispered, staring at her readings. "Their ship. It's being forced to exist fully within our universe's physical laws." "Target that world killer," Captain Winters ordered, her voice steady despite her disbelief. "All remaining weapons." Ryan Cooper at Weapons Control didn't hesitate. The Invictus fired everything it had left: conventional torpedoes, plasma beams, and the few counterphase torpedoes they had managed to save. Under normal circumstances, these weapons would have barely scratched the void-born vessel. But now, forced to obey the physical constants of the human universe, the once invincible ship had no defense against them. The torpedoes struck first, tearing huge holes in the alien structure. Plasma beams cut through sections that had previously absorbed all energy without effect. Secondary explosions rippled across the massive world killer as its internal systems, no longer able to operate under different physical laws, catastrophically failed. "The other world killers are changing course," Olivia reported, her voice rising with excitement. "They're retreating." But the victory came at a terrible cost. Throughout the Invictus, systems were failing as the backlash from the shield pulse tore through the ship. Hull breaches opened on multiple decks. Power conduits exploded. The lights on the bridge flickered and died, leaving only the glow of emergency systems. "Engineering reports shield generators completely destroyed," Jack Morris announced, holding onto his console as the ship shuddered. "Sam says the reactor containment is failing. We have maybe 10 minutes before it goes critical." Elaine nodded, grimly. Order all remaining personnel to escape pods. Abandon ship. Captain, Kate Thompson called from communications. I'm receiving transmissions from New Terra. The black energy covering the planet is receding. The conversion process is reversing. A cheer went up from the exhausted bridge crew. They had done it. They had not only stopped the Voidborn, but had begun to undo the damage already done. The dimensional bridge was collapsing, forcing the alien universe's influence back through the rift. In the corridor outside engineering, Dr. Natalie Ford stumbled through smoke and debris, helping Sam, Russell navigate despite his injuries. They had just sealed the reactor room, buying the remaining crew precious minutes to escape before the inevitable explosion. We did it, Sam said, coughing violently. We actually did it. Natalie nodded, a tired smile on her face. Not bad for a species that only recently figured out faster than light travel, huh? They reached an escape pod, just as another explosion rocked the ship. Natalie helped Sam inside and was about to follow when she paused, her scientific curiosity getting the better of her even now. The readings from the rift, I need to get a final measurement, she said. It could be crucial for understanding how to fight them if they return. Natalie, there's no time, Sam protested. 30 seconds, she promised. I'll take the next pod. Before he could argue further, she sealed his escape pod and sent it launching toward New Terra. Then she turned and raced back toward the nearest sensor station. On the bridge, Captain Winters was also refusing to leave. Go, Jack, she ordered her second-in-command. That's an order. Someone needs to coordinate what's left of our forces if the Voidborn return. Commander Morris stood his ground. With all due respect, Captain, I'm staying. Lieutenant Green can handle that job. Olivia looked between her two superior officers, conflict clear on her face. Lieutenant, Elaine said firmly, you have your orders. Take the last bridge escape pod and make sure our discovery isn't lost if we fail. Reluctantly, Olivia saluted and headed for the escape pod. As the door closed behind her, Jack turned to Elaine. Someone needs to pilot the Invictus away from New Terra before the reactor goes, he said simply. Too many lives at stake. Elaine nodded. Then let's finish this together, old friend. With the bridge nearly empty, they worked quickly to set a course that would take the dying ship as far from New Terra as possible in the few minutes they had left. As they worked, Elaine noticed something on the main sensor display. Jack, look at this. The dimensional rift isn't just closing, it's pushing back. On the screen, they could see energy flowing from their universe into the Voidborn space, the exact opposite of what had been happening before. The shield pulse had not only blocked the alien physics from entering their universe, but had created a backflow effect, forcing Earth's physical laws into the other dimension. We didn't just stop them, Jack realized. We might have hurt them in their own space. A grim smile crossed Elaine's face. Good. Maybe next time they'll think twice before trying to rewrite our universe. The ship's computer announced that reactor containment would fail in 2 minutes. The Invictus had traveled far enough from New Terra that the explosion wouldn't endanger the planet. Their job was done. Jack looked at Elaine. It's been an honor serving with you, Captain. Likewise, Commander, she replied. Then she reached out and took his hand. I wonder if anyone will ever know what happened here. They'll know we won, Jack said confidently. The Invictus stood when nothing else could. That's enough. As the reactor reached critical levels, they watched the sensor readings showing the Voidborn fleet retreating to the edges of the system. The dimensional rift had completely collapsed, taking the alien bridge with it. New Terra, though scarred, would survive. In the final moments before the Invictus's reactor detonated, Captain Elaine Winters sent one last message to the escape pods carrying her crew to safety. This is Captain Winters of the TAS Invictus. We faced an enemy that had crushed entire galaxies, and we found a way to beat them. Remember this day not as the end of one ship, but as the moment humanity proved. We will never be broken. We will rebuild. We will advance. And if the Voidborn or anything like them ever return, they'll find us ready. Invictus out. The message reached the survivors just as a brilliant flash of light marked the end of the greatest warship humanity had ever built. But from that light, a new hope was born. The technology developed aboard the Invictus would become the foundation for a new generation of defenses. The understanding of dimensional physics gained through their sacrifice would open new frontiers of science, and though other threats would emerge from the depths of space in the years that followed, none would ever forget the lesson of New Terra. Galaxies might crumble, but humanity would stand unbroken,